Think about it. In major events, it's often the small details that can make or break them. Take the 1986 Challenger disaster, for example. A cheapo similarly, the Challenger disaster cost 7 lives and hundreds of millions of dollars. Even a tiny blood clot barely visible under a microscope can be fatal by blocking blood flow to a critical part of the brain. Even a small patch of ice on the road can cause a vehicle to spin out of control and result in a deadly crash. The list goes on. It's clear that seemingly insignificant factors can have devastating consequences for significant endeavors. Marriage certainly falls into the category of important undertakings. I for one hold my marriage in high regard. I've been married to my lovely wife April for just over 8 years, and we have 2 amazing boys, Chris and Charles. I didn't earn a college degree, but my skills as a mechanic have provided us with a comfortable life in a spacious home. Despite the long hours I put into my job, the financial stability it brings makes it worthwhile. My marriage has always been the highlight of my life, and I've worked diligently to support my family. Unfortunately, it's often the small things that can unravel such significant commitments. In my case, it was a tiny blood clot. The vessel in my brain that caused the downfall was in close proximity to another vessel, which led to swelling and triggered a debilitating migraine headache. I experienced one such episode on a particularly fateful day. The symptoms were familiar: sensitivity to light, escalating sounds, and unbearable smells. The sudden onset of excruciating pain caught me off guard. Without my Imitrex inhaler, I had no means to alleviate the agony. While I had pills on hand, they weren't as effective and would take time to ease the pain to a manageable level, rendering me I couldn't work, so I went to my boss's office and told him the bad news. He immediately got his secretary, Penny, to take me home safely and told me not to drive. He said, "For heaven's sake, go now." My boss helped me out of the office and down the hallway to the exit. Once outside, Penny helped me lean against the wall and shielded my eyes from the harsh light as she went to her car. I kept my eyes shut tightly and pressed my hands against my temples. As we drove, I tried to dull the pain, but it was still there, throbbing away. My vision was blurred, and the light was unbearable, so I kept my eyes shut. The sounds around me turned into an overwhelming buzz, and the smell made my stomach churn. Thankfully, Penny knew the way to my house, so I didn't need to give directions. It felt like an eternity, but eventually, she pulled up outside my home, helped me out of the car, and guided me inside. Once in the kitchen, I instructed Penny to retrieve her inhaler from. She put the inhaler in my hand and helped me take it out of the fridge. I took a deep breath as the medication entered my bloodstream. Then I asked her to help me to the living room, which is next to the kitchen. I asked her to draw the blinds and turn off all the lights, which she did after a few minutes. I could already sense some relief, so I thanked Penny for her help and welcomed the peace and quiet as she left. I fell asleep quickly because the pain eased. I woke up later to the sound of voices. The room was dark, so I knew it was probably later in the day. I remembered where I was and realized the pain had gone. I was still a bit sore but felt better than I had before. I sat up slowly, waiting for the pain to come back. Thankfully, it didn't. I heard my wife April and her neighbor Robin talking. I was hidden from view in the gloom and the soft lighting. April might have thought I was resting after coming home early, but my car wasn't parked in the driveway. She probably hadn't realized I was there at all. I thought I could surprise them both. I rose quietly, planning to sneak to the door and then make my presence known. As I tuned into their conversation, I heard April say, "How was it? Was it as good as before? Give me the details, girl." It was amazing. I felt like I was in heaven, even better than last time. I swear it was almost mind-blowing. It was the best physical and emotional experience I've ever had. It was even better than with Chris. In fact, it was better than with your husband. I adore Chris, but he never made me feel like that. I would never let him do those things. He'd think I was a strumpet, but Carl knows and I like it. I can't wait for next time. Have you thought about the consequences? What if Chris finds out? I'll never know, and even if I did, there's no way Chris would leave me. He'd never risk losing the kids. I'd take them in a heartbeat with a good lawyer. This isn't like you, April. It's worrying. I think you're making a big mistake. I love Chris, truly, but I won't give up what I have with Carl. I want both the passion with Carl and the love with Chris. I need both, and I won't let go. I've had my fill, though the migraine subsided. The ache in my heart was worse. It gripped me so tightly that my stomach was in knots, and each breath felt like a struggle. I heard a ringing in my ears, and my pulse thundered in my head. I was afraid that a heart attack was about to happen, so I clung to the doorframe until I started to feel calmer again, but I still didn't show myself. I was still angry, though, and I was getting ready to explode. I straightened up and went into the kitchen, breaking the silence. Robin was the first to notice me. She was shocked and fell silent. April caught on to what was going on. When she saw me, her expression changed from happy to surprised, then to worried, and finally to angry. She pushed her chair back and confronted me. She asked how much I'd heard and why I'd been spying on her. I met her gaze in silence, then glanced at Robin, who quickly excused herself. I need to go, Pete. I can take care of the boys if you need time. I'll call you later, she said before hurrying out the side door. I watched her departure wordlessly. Left alone, I turned my attention back to April. Once, I thought, she'd be cherished unconditionally for 8 blissful years. 8 years I thought would stretch into eternity. We'd grow old together. But tonight that ended. There would be no forever for us. April ended it all tonight. What were you up to while you were having your fun with your lover? Did you even think about them, or were you too busy enjoying yourself with someone else while leaving them unattended? I'm composed and collected now, but the pain is still there, sharp and deep. It'll take a while for it to ease. April's face was twisted with anger, hiding her beauty with ugliness. Maybe that mask was the real April, hidden beneath the surface all along. She said the boys are with Carly, Robin, and I went shopping and Pete watched over them. I wasn't with anyone else, just Robin. She seemed to feel pretty pleased with herself. The anger on her face had morphed into satisfaction, finally realizing I had been at home. She asked what I was doing there, where my car was, and why I'd been sitting in the dark. She seemed to think I'd been spying on her, trying to catch her in the act. I came home early with a terrible migraine. George asked Penny to drive me home because I couldn't handle the light, so I took my Imitrex and fell asleep. I've been here ever since, with a queasiness in my stomach and a strong urge to vomit. I got up and hurried to the bathroom. Your VOS woke me, and what I heard made me sick. I need the bathroom, I thought, as I dashed to the bathroom. Attempting to expel the contents of my stomach wasn't entirely successful, but my body certainly tried its best. I settled onto the bathroom floor, finding relief as my body gradually relaxed against the cool porcelain. Finally, my stomach calmed and my breathing steadied. The sweat on my face dried as the nausea faded away. After a few moments, I rose, splashing water on my face. Once I'd rinsed out my mouth and got myself together, I went back to the kitchen where April was sitting looking out of the window. I told her I was going to get the boys ready for bed and then I left, going next door to the Andersons. Pete and Robin were not only our neighbors but also our closest friends. I'd shared so many evenings with them, chatting and enjoying drinks. Best friends. I thought bitterly. What on earth did Pete know? I should have asked. I knocked on their back door and went in. I found Robin at the kitchen table, chatting with her husband. I could tell she'd told him. He looked up with pity in his eyes as I came in. Robin seemed a bit uneasy. I said, I've come to get the boys. Are they ready to head home? I went to the living room, where I figured the boys were with Carly, their teenage daughter. They were huddled over a puzzle, with Carly watching over them as I entered. She greeted me with a smile and said, Hey, Mr. Phillips, are you here for them? I'll get their jackets. I stood there watching them, feeling a bit sad. These scenes used to be full of everyday joy, but now they seem to show the effects of infidelity. The innocence of family life is gone. Adults are often selfish, and this can be irreparable. This felt like one of those times. Thanks, Carly. I'll be in the kitchen when they're ready. I went back to the kitchen, where Pete and Robin were still sitting. I looked at Robin, then at Pete. Did you know? Were you aware she was cheating on me? Pete, did it give you some twisted satisfaction knowing while we were together? Did it give you some sick thrill? My anger fueled my words, harsher than necessary, but I needed answers from my dear friends. I should have sensed something. Pete shot a glance at Robin, his anger. I could tell from his expression that he knew. I swear, buddy, I had no clue. If I had known, I'd have told you right away. I can't believe my wife knew and kept it from me. It's despicable. You don't deserve this. I won't apologize to her, but I'm here for you if you need me. His gaze hardened as he looked at his wife. I believed him. He would have confided in me if he had known. So that was Robin and April's secret. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Robin. I sneered. Thanks. For making me look like a fool, a betrayed man, a guy who didn't need to know his wife was fooling around with another guy. I hope that sits well with you, knowing what you knew while thinking of me. I turned as I noticed Carly approaching hastily, putting on a smile as the boys emerged, each clutching a cookie. I silently prayed Carly hadn't overheard my last words, but the look on her face suggested otherwise. This was the last time Robin would spend with my boys. I vowed I'd figure out how to make it up to them somehow. We came in through the back door, and the boys dashed upstairs to change for dinner. I crossed the empty kitchen into the dimly lit living room, where April sat, keeping the room shadowed much like the secrets she harbored. I turned on a nearby lamp and drew back the curtains, illuminating the space and revealing. April looked dreadful. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her complexion pale, her shoulders slouched, and her defiance had melted away. She looked like the fearful woman I anticipated. However, it felt too late for such a transformation. Instead of offering solace, her newfound vulnerability disgusted me. Was she truly remorseful, or simply scared? I couldn't believe such a drastic change could happen in mere minutes. A complete change in attitude in just a few minutes. This was the start of our power struggle. My wife was deceitful, hiding her infidelity. Her face showed not regret but deception and guile. I confronted her, demanding to know who he is and what he offers that I don't. She remained silent until I was sure she wouldn't respond. As I turned to leave, she finally spoke. His identity doesn't matter. It's not about you, Chris. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I never wanted you to find out like this. I'm really sorry you heard my conversation with Robin. Please, I'm asking you to understand. It's not that I have any regrets about the act itself. I'm not sorry for what happened. I just regret being caught and you learning the truth. I shook my head and sat down in the armchair she gave me on our 5th anniversary. I used to love it, but now it just... Furniture, please. Let me explain. Our story doesn't have to end here. We can salvage what we had if only you'd try to understand. We could move forward. She pleaded with me in a way that made me feel like I should agree with her. Can you promise it's over? That you'll never see him again? I kept my tone calm, but I felt my body tense up. I gripped the chair's arms tightly. April met my gaze with tear. Her eyes were filled with tears, but she didn't reply. The silence said it all. She wouldn't stop. I heard her words to Robin. She was looking for a way forward and wasn't going to let me get in her way. She wasn't willing to give up on him and wanted my approval. I think this is your decision. After dinner, I'll put the boys to bed, and then we can look at our options tomorrow. I'll pack my things and stay with my brother. I left for the kitchen, which was my refuge. In times of chaos, it's interesting how the kitchen can become a sanctuary. When your world is falling apart, it's surprising to realize it's actually falling apart. April was busy preparing dinner while I spent some quality time with the boys in the playroom, engrossed in their game. April called us for dinner, prompting a noisy transition as I helped the boys wash up after their game. Despite the chaos, dinner was lively. The boys were full of energy and enjoyed the meal together, which was a stark contrast to their subdued parents, lost in thought over looming decisions. It's interesting to see the innocence of childhood slipping away. Kids often yearn to grow up, perceiving adult freedom as boundless and unaware of the consequences and responsibilities that come with it. However, adults understand these things better, yet some still disregard limits and consequences. After dinner, April cleaned the kitchen while I took the boys to bed. We chatted until they fell asleep, dreaming of anything and everything. My heart ached as I watched, knowing this too must end. I sank into a chair, grasping for stability. My world was slipping away beyond my control. I loved April deeply, but her words echoed in my mind. He never made me feel this way. His strumpet, there was no turning back from those words as I considered the possibilities. I felt the love within me diminish. April entered and took a seat. We need to talk. I understand you're upset, but you must understand my perspective. What I share with Carl is purely physical and the allure of novelty. I anticipate it'll fade soon, but currently I can't seem to break away. It's what stimulates me, but it doesn't affect my love for you. He's just a distraction. It'll end soon, and we can go back to how things were. You just have to let it run its course. Her words flowed, but I struggled to understand. I can't resist this. I can't stop seeing him. Should I allow this to continue? Is she irrational or just deluded? It must stop. Clearly, you're the one failing to grasp reality. There's no us, there's no we. It's just you and it's all down to him now. Our marriage is over. It's finished. It's done. There's no going back. And I'm not willing to negotiate. You need to understand this, despite 8 years of marriage. You can't possibly believe I'd condone your affair. Chris, I love you. You're the only man I've ever loved. I don't even like Carl. Please try to understand. Give me time. Please, baby. For the sake of our marriage and family, give me time. Take all the time you need. You need tomorrow. I'll get a lawyer and we'll split everything equally. I don't want to hurt you like you hurt me. I just want this to end now. I was really tired and wanted to go to bed to get some rest from the heartache. My headache had gone away, but I was still feeling sad. I wasn't prepared for what she said next. Damn you. No divorce. I'll fight you every step of the way and take everything you have. I'll make sure. If you don't comply, I'll restrict your visitation rights in every way possible. If you don't get custody of the boys, you'll lose everything. I'll still have Carl. Don't forget that I absorbed her threat. Then it struck me that this marriage had been over long ago. The level of anger and disrespect wasn't abrupt, it was calculated and deliberate. She never intended to hurt me. If she had, she wouldn't have. She would have ended it if she could have. Instead, she kept going and made sure I knew what she was doing. Love wasn't part of the plan. It was all about greed and hurting me. As my anger grew, I could see she'd gone too far. Her face showed she knew she'd messed up. She went from happy to scared. I kept going. I have one thing to say. If you corner a rat, it fights back. It'll fight to the bitter end if you deny it any chance of escape. You should have known that before pushing me, but now you've done it and you'll pay the price. I don't want this, but I'm left with no choice. I love you and will do anything to keep you from leaving. If you don't understand and accept this, I'll fight you. You'll have no option but to stay. I know you, Chris. You love me and the boys too much to leave. You'll stay, won't you? April, let the boys know. I'll see them when I can. I'll gather some belongings and leave. I'll retrieve the rest later when we can arrange a time. I'll go upstairs. I quickly packed a bag for a day or so. I only took essentials from the bathroom. I took a few changes of clothes. After 8 years of marriage, all that remained were bitter memories. But I had 2 wonderful sons, and that was my focus now. I found April seated by the kitchen door, evidently ready to try again. "Chris, please reconsider. I'm begging you. There's no need. Promise me you'll end things with him. You'll never see him again. Just say it, and maybe there's hope." I pushed past her, fighting the urge to strike her with all my might. But I knew I had to control myself. I restrained myself from showing my anger. "I'll visit in the evenings after work so the boys won't notice anything right away." I opened the door and stepped outside. It slammed shut behind me as I tossed my bag into the back seat and climbed into my truck. I was backing out of the garage when I dialed Clyde, my brother. He lived about 10 miles away. Ever since his wife left with her boyfriend, he'd been living alone. A few years ago, he'd been living on his own, not knowing where she was and not caring that she was gone. Even though he didn't get divorced, Clyde didn't let it hold him back. He'd started drinking a lot, often with his friends almost every night. We talked about it, but Clyde never changed. He rarely got drunk, but he was usually high. Maybe he was trying to forget things. At least he listened as I explained. He told me to go over there and that he'd be back later. I drove over and got the spare key from under the flower pot on the porch. I let myself in and everything was as tidy as always. Clyde was never messy. He was always tidy and well organized. It was nice to see that despite everything. Clyde's place was the same as I remembered. I grabbed a few beers from the fridge and settled in, just as he'd advised. By the time he returned, I was pleasantly intoxicated. I fetched another beer from the store and continued drinking. When Clyde arrived, I simply informed him of the fight with April, and he joined in drinking the remainder. He had a few beers to keep me in check and told me he was there for me, that we were brothers. The next morning I woke up with a terrible hangover and a pounding headache. I'd overdone it, even though I had reasons. I stumbled into the shower, letting the cold water wash away the remnants of I was still drunk, but there was no point in staying that way. I looked for Clyde and found a note saying he was at work and would report me, which was no surprise since we both had Saturday shifts. Clyde and I worked for a company renting heavy construction equipment to major contractors across the state. We were known as the best. Notch mechanics serve customers from all over. Our job was to keep the machinery running, no matter what the job demanded. It was long hours, but it paid well enough to support my family. I didn't fully understand why I had to keep earning the money that supported April's pride and joy, the spacious house. I saw it as a haven for our family and a source of. April was proud of being able to provide for her family, but I had a different take on it. To her, it was a safety net and leverage in case of divorce. She wanted the house and my earnings, not for our family's security, but to fund her lover's indulgences. She also spent a lot on clothes and trips to Victoria's Secret. I tried to ignore these thoughts, even though I was running late. I needed to get to work to focus, strategize, and make decisions. I couldn't do those things in my current state. April had clearly planned this in advance, knowing I wouldn't think clearly after discovering her betrayal. She'd manipulated the situation to make me look like the villain for disapproving of her affair. I dressed and fetched a box. I filled a few large trash bags with clothes and other items from my closet and drawers, then loaded them into my truck. I had a few essential items from the bathroom in a smaller bag. I was going to return after work to spend time with the kids. I had a lot to think about and decide on. One thing was for sure, my marriage was over. April would never be my wife, lover, or confidant again. She belonged to someone else now. As I thought about it, tears welled up and I sank to the floor of what was once our bedroom. I was overwhelmed with grief. It's hard to deal with, especially at work. I threw myself into my duties, working hard even through lunch breaks. I was trying to drown out my thoughts. I was at home, a wife and mother, dealing with the challenges of fuel injectors, timing chains, and fuel pumps. I took on the toughest tasks without complaint, consumed by a fervor to bury myself in work. 10 hours later, Clyde interrupted, urging me to take a break. "Yes up, dude. You're making the rest of us look like slackers," he said, watching me with a mixture of surprise and concern. Sorry, little brother. I'm just trying to lose. I was just trying to forget my mistake. I must have seemed on the verge of tears as Clyde guided me off the shop floor and into the break area. Clyde and I had been inseparable since our parents' tragic accident a decade ago. He had been my best man at the wedding, and 8 years ago he became the godfather to my boys, Chris Jr. and Charlie. Seated at the table, I stared blankly as Clyde poured us each a cup of coffee. I took a sip of coffee, which was pretty bland but nice and warm. I told him to go for it, to spill it, lay it all out, no holding back. Clyde encouraged me to recount the ordeal in detail for the next 10 minutes. I poured out to Clyde every last bit of shame, humiliation, and contempt April had heaped upon me. I told him about her menacing threats, her calculated attempts to undermine any retaliation on my part while safeguarding. I told him about her affair. I showed him the look on her face when she was boasting to Robin about her tryst and the cold determination in her threats to strip me of everything. It was clear that her lover's gratification was the most important thing to her. She was unwilling to give him up for anything. Clyde was taken aback. He had always regarded April highly, seeing her as a virtuous woman and dedicated mother. His brother had never hinted at any marital issues. Clyde was shocked to see how much Chris was suffering. Chris was a rock for April, a devoted father, a reliable provider, and a trusted confidant for the guys in the garage. He was always there when they needed him. Over the years, he had gone above and beyond to help others. So, why was Clyde so angry? April had done this to Chris. What was wrong with her? His indignation grew as he watched his brother and closest friend crumble and give in. Chris, you can't just accept this. We have to take action. Let me and the guy lend a hand. This is unbearable. Clyde implored, concern etched on his rugged features. It was genuine care for his brother palpable in the air. Chris met his gaze with a despondent look. If I divorce her, I'll lose everything: child support, alimony, the house, the car. I'd never hurt the kids, she's using them as pawns against me. Now, that idiot she's fooling around with will replace their father. He's an idiot who thinks it's okay to cheat on another man's wife. I'm at my wit's end. Clyde shook his head vehemently. To hell with both of them. I used to love. April is like a sister to me, but she's made her bed and now she'll have to lie in it. We need to go after both of them. First step, figure out who he is. That's the easy part. Let me make a couple of calls, then we'll discuss. Clyde said. I simply shrugged. I'm not sure what you expect me to do. She doesn't share anything about him with me. It doesn't matter. We'll track him down and expose him like we would anyone else. If you do that with anyone else, you'll realize you can't take April back. What she did makes reconciliation impossible. If you condone her actions, she'll never respect you again. She's someone else's plaything now. His words caught me off guard momentarily, but then a faint smile crept onto my face. You're right, she's not my beloved wife anymore. Last night taught me how swiftly love can morph into hatred. Today, I feel more animosity towards her than love. Last night, she stole that from me and turned it against herself. I made that clear, then we chatted a bit more and wrapped up work without any extra hours. We went to a nearby bar, but we weren't going to get drunk. We needed to make business plans. Clyde made a few more calls, and we sat down to strategize. I was touched. I was really touched by the support my friends gave me. They didn't pry, they just wanted to know how they could help. Together, we came up with a plan that evening. I pulled into my driveway and went into the house. It struck me as funny that this was no longer my home, it was just a place to stay. I put my jacket in the kitchen and made my way to the living room, where April was sitting watching Chris and Charlie, our 5-year-old. The twins, who were old enough to know better, were engrossed in a video game. I stood there, taking it all in, and I saw April meet my gaze. She gave me a faint smile that revealed her true feelings, and I saw that she was contemptuous of me and our facade of family unity. It was all a charade orchestrated by her deception. I understood. I returned her gaze with a look of disinterest. When I turned away, she averted her eyes and headed to the kitchen. I peered into the fridge and pulled out what appeared to be leftover fried chicken and mashed potatoes. I reheated them in the microwave. I wasn't hungry. I was hungry, but I needed to take my mind off things. I had planned to speak with the boys before they went to bed, but Clyde advised against it. He said I should wait until tomorrow. When I do speak to them, it will be the first move in the battle initiated by April. I might have lost my doubts, but I will fight to the end. I sat at the table with my plate and began to eat slowly. The food was not very satisfying, but it was necessary for sustenance. About halfway through, April joined me at the table. She sat across from me. I glanced at her briefly before returning my focus. As I ate, I chewed slowly, but there were no words exchanged. I had nothing to say to her at the moment. "Are you feeling more composed after last night?" she asked. "Can we engage in a civilized conversation now?" Her words caught me off guard. "Civilized adults," she said. "How about a cheating woman and her betrayed husband? That's more realistic." I withheld my response. "Are you going to ignore me now?" Acting childish and silent. I had higher expectations of her. "We need to consider the children. You must remember your role as their father." Am I really their father now? I'm starting to wonder. Maybe I should do some tests to confirm. Let's keep this civil. No anger. Just a simple statement. April's expression darkened with fury as she was poised to retort when I calmly interjected. "Remember your tone, April. The children might overhear if you start shouting. Remember them. The ones. You said I neglected the kids last night when I got upset. Well, now it's your turn to remember what you've done to their world. Not only did you have an affair, you also shattered our entire family. Think carefully, April." April paused, lowering her voice to a hiss. "You didn't seem to consider my words last night. I expected you to. To move past this and return to normal, nothing will change at home. I still love you and you are my husband. That hasn't changed. Neither you nor the children will lose anything familiar. I keep my affairs discreet, conducting my business when they're at school and you're at work. You have nothing to lose as I'm always here for you." I kept eating, but I was still. I didn't react at all. My eyes showed nothing as I looked at her. Even though I didn't say anything, my eyes told her everything. Slowly, April started to understand what was going on. She looked scared. "What do you want? Do you think you'll make things difficult for me? I really hoped you loved me enough to give me this time alone. I told you last night that he didn't take anything from you and that I'll always support you. Why can't you grasp that?" April grew increasingly emotional while I continued to stare at her calmly. My food finally went down. I suggested let's save this discussion for after the kids are in bed. "I listened to you last night despite my discomfort, but I won't entertain this conversation while the children are awake." April appeared to regain her composure and resumed smiling. "Thanks for that. I think you had some valid points, but your words hurt me. I'll take the boys." She went upstairs soon after that, and then we could talk. She passed by me, putting her hand on my shoulder. I flinched at her touch, and she took her hand back. I could feel the disgust from that simple gesture, and it was so strong with the kids around. I tried to keep my usual self, though I knew everything was about to change. It weighed heavily on me, but I had come to terms with the fact that April's actions had shattered it all. Perhaps I should just play the role of the compliant husband and accept her terms. Wait until she's done with her affair. After all, hadn't she claimed she still loved me and wanted to remain married? But I knew I couldn't do it. Not now, not ever again. It was around 9. April came into the room where I was sitting and let out a big sigh. She sat down and smiled. I put the kids to bed, and they fell asleep. They're getting too big to tuck in, but they still say good night and pretend to sleep. They're good kids. I agreed. They're wonderful kids. It's unfortunate that they'll have to endure so much pain, and I'm unsure how to ease their suffering. What do you mean? I thought you understood that nothing needs to change. Just give me what I want and we can return to being the same family we were. Just be patient. I promised it would all be over soon. You won't lose anything. I love you deeply and want to remain your wife. It's just something I have to do. That's all. I gazed at the woman who had been my wife for the past 8 years. I married her because I couldn't imagine life without her. We had 2 amazing children and a solid marriage until last night. Now everything was different, and she couldn't comprehend why I deemed it necessary. I'm not going to get into the specifics tonight, but I needed to be clear. April, I heard you out last night. You made your desires clear. You said you love me and want to be my wife. You said he doesn't take anything from me and you're not going to tell me who he is because it's none of my business. You also outlined the consequences if you said you'd take everything from me without a second thought. You even threatened to take my boys. April listened, her face showing she was angry. She wasn't happy with how I'd summarized her words. But they sounded different to her. I know you don't see it that way, Chris, but I think we need to talk about this. I've said before that this isn't about our marriage, but you haven't listened. Why can't you trust me when I say that I still love you and want to make our marriage work? Last night, April was really disdainful towards me and our marriage when I expressed frustration. You responded with threats that you'd thought about before addressing me. You're disdainful of me for all my efforts on our behalf over the years. You belittle me, degrade me, threaten me, and accuse me of misunderstanding. You knew I'd react this way, so why did you think you already knew what to do with me? Why did you think you had all the answers? I was starting to feel angry, but I'd managed to stay calm until now. April was enraged. Your tone infuriated me. I came to one conclusion that you seemed to overlook last night, April. When you threatened me and backed me into a corner, thinking I couldn't find a way out, I mentioned it then and I'll reiterate it now. Even a rat will fight a cat when cornered and with nothing left to lose. With these words, I stood up. I walked away as I approached the kitchen door where April was seated. I paused. I'm going to stay elsewhere for the night. I'll return after work so the kids won't notice anything right away. Why are you planning to stay somewhere else? Why not stay here? We can't resolve this problem if you leave, Chris. I love you and I don't want to lose you. I don't know what I'll do if you leave me. Chris, let's try to work this out. There must be a way to reconcile. I'm sorry, April. The only thing I know for sure now is that I don't love you anymore. Your infidelity last night has made me lose all love for you. That's the only thing I know. I'm not sure what I'll do next, but I know I can't go back now, Chris. What about your vows to love and cherish me? Have you forgotten them? I also remember your vows to me. You promised on our wedding day to forsake all others, but you didn't. You promised to love only me, but you shared what we had with another man. I cared for you, loved you, upheld our marital vows and gave you everything I had. It wasn't enough. You gave what was mine to someone else and broke my heart. So, yes, I can move past this. You broke my heart and I can leave. I went to Clyde's house, where he said I could stay as long as I needed to finish what we started. Before I know it, it'll all be over and I'll be starting anew in the following days. I managed to balance work with evenings spent with my kids, but I avoided any further interaction with April despite her attempts to engage. I walked away each time, even when she yelled at me. I just left without saying anything during a work break. A colleague told Clyde that everything was ready and we'd have the results in a few days. All that was left was to be patient. The routine continued the same until the following week. Each evening I came back to an increasingly agitated April. The kids seemed to be fine, but Charlie's I asked about my long hours and he gave me a reassurance. He seemed satisfied and the momentary crisis passed. April kept on asking questions, but I ignored her. By the end of the week she'd left with the kids. Clyde came into the break room and handed me a folder without a word. I opened it to find a brief report. It was about Carl Cummings, a 24-year-old junior attorney at Lincoln Rice and Holmes, divorced 2 years ago, he's financially stable, and he lives in a condo where April had visited multiple times that week. Now that I have his name and address, I'm wondering what it is about him that I didn't see before. But it's no longer my concern. If April had approached me earlier, we might have resolved things differently. So what's next? What steps should I take? I asked Clyde for guidance, even though it was my issue. Clyde seemed to be in charge. I was lucky to have friends, and a brother like Clyde's a good guy and a hard worker, so he's my go-to for friendship. I really needed that now, more than ever. Everything's moving forward, and the first step is tonight. I'll give you a call when it's set up. Just keep your phone close so you can let her know and put an end to this mess. I knew it needed to be done, but it didn't bring relief. This wasn't my preferred approach, but April and her lover left me no choice. I fought back the only way I could. I'm not a lawyer or a wealthy strategist. I'm a mechanic, a hard-working guy who takes pride in his work. I loved April deeply, but my efforts weren't enough for her. My plan aligned with my world, and she'd soon realize it. I went home and joined my family for dinner as usual. April engaged with the kids, and I participated in conversations and activities. I was really nervous after dinner, but I spent quality time with the kids playing video games and assisting with homework. I played the role of the typical husband and father. April finished the dishes and observed the scene. I was more at ease, perhaps thinking everything would soon return to normal, as I played video games with my boys. Carl Cummings left his office and headed to his car, parked across town. He reflected on the intense encounter with April at his place 2 days earlier. She was eager for him and agreed for the first time to get close when he asked why. After their meeting, she revealed. Her husband had found out about their affair. Carl was reassured by her not to worry. It seemed odd that her husband's knowledge made her more adventurous. Despite this, it was the best physical and engaging experience he'd had. He brushed it off, walking past an alley toward his car. He suddenly stumbled, feeling a pull as he struggled to maintain his balance. He was trying to avoid falling when someone grabbed his arms and pulled him down the alley toward the courtyard. He was pinned against the wall of a building by 2 big guys with black ski masks on. He tried to look them in the eye, but he couldn't see their faces. They were pretty intimidating, and he didn't have much cash on him, and he didn't have any flashy accessories. He was starting to get scared. What did they want? The third masked man, who was wearing gloves, stepped forward and lifted Carl's face with a firm grip under his chin. He asked in a coarse voice, "You know April Phillips, right?" The mention of her name sent a shiver down Carl's spine. Oh, so that's what this is about. Her husband? No, I don't know anyone by that name. He stammered, shaking yet determined to deny everything. The hefty man landed a blow to his ribs, causing excruciating pain and stealing his breath. Dizzy, he saw stars swirling before him. The intense agony gripped him, instilling deep fear. I'll ask again. You familiar with a woman named April Phillips? Idiot. Unable to deceive any longer, Carl abandoned denial. Yes, I know her. Please, God, let me make it out of here alive. He prayed silently, hoping he'd never have to see her again. The imposing figure waited for his response. Crystal clear. Got it. Perhaps it was just a warning. Got it. He could accept that. He needed to make sure his colleagues understood. They weren't convinced that someone like him messing with other men's wives was a good idea, so we're going to make sure you understand. The big man explained ominously, then they let him steady himself against the wall. The first blow hit him hard in the groin, making him double over despite his agony. They prevented him from collapsing, then delivered another blow to his ribs. A sharp click signaled a broken rib, then came a devastating blow to his jaw. One blow to his jaw nearly toppled him with pain. They kept going until he blacked out. They probably kept going until they stopped, and then they brought him back to consciousness. They kept repeating a few words. His memory faded until he woke up in the emergency room at Memorial Hospital. His injuries weren't life-threatening. He was admitted to the general care unit, heavily medicated and in intense pain. Grateful for his survival, he whispered a prayer. They informed him that she might contact him, instructing him precisely what to say. He recalled the words he needed to convey to her. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Phillips. It was my fault and I regret it. I'll stop contacting you and your children. Sorry our paths ever crossed. Goodbye, Carl." He was lying on the bed, waiting for her call. He had rehearsed these words in his mind to avoid any errors. He reminded himself that any deviation would not go unnoticed and the consequences would be severe. He repeated the phrases to himself once more. He vowed never to pursue a married woman again, regardless of who she may be. It was just past 8 in the evening, while he was playing with the twins, my cell phone rang. I excused myself to another room and took the call. I saw that it was from Clyde and heard a brief message. "It's done. Lesson 1 completed." He was admitted to the hospital, then the call ended. I returned to the living room with a smile. April noticed but said nothing. She smiled back, thinking it was good news. Later, April took the children upstairs, casting as she gave me a quick look to make sure I'd be there when she got back. She smiled and went to put the kids to bed. I waited in the living room. April came back with a coffee pot and cups. She suggested we talk some more. She noticed I seemed resigned and said she was relieved, but also worried about losing me. In comparison to the depth of our relationship, these were trivial matters. I observed her as she spoke, and her beauty still captivated me. After all, she was the woman I'd cherished for so long. I'd envisioned a future of growing old together, but now those plans and dreams lay shattered. "Let's get to the end of this now, April. I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully." I began. "I know your lover's name is Carl Cummings is a junior associate at Lincoln Rice & Holmes. I know all about him, including your 2 meetings with him this week." April seemed surprised and ready to respond, but I motioned for her to stay silent. "The issue is that you threatened to divorce me when I expressed my anger. You threatened to take away everything I have. I remember your exact words, etched into my mind. You Sadie take. You said a lot more than that." Those were the words that lingered in my mind, dripping with contempt. They were the words that shattered our marriage and pushed me into a corner where I felt I had no choice but to watch you engage in closeness with another man. I told you the following night that cornered rats fight back. I could see the initial flickers of fear and discomfort on her face. I wasn't sure what was going to happen, but she was smart enough to know it wasn't going to be good for her. Her shoulders tensed up, and she instinctively pulled her head back. "I know you told Robin that I never made you feel the way you felt with him. You were his mistress." I continued. "I don't regret that this will end badly for you. However, Mr. Cummings has been told that his involvement with you is over. He'll never see you again or get close to you again. He was also told not to contact my sons, and he agreed." I could see her face register shock and disbelief. I went on. "I'll start divorce proceedings, citing infidelity. There'll be no spousal support for you, but child support will be provided by my sons, so they'll lack nothing. I'll make sure you have the resources you need to fulfill your duties, but you'll need to work for what you want. I'll take care of the paperwork and serve you in April." April Rose's face showed her anger. "You're out of your mind if you think I'll agree to this. I'll take everything you have, just as I promised. You should call Mr. Cummings right now and ask him what he thinks. Oh, wait, I think you might need to dial the hospital. The call I received earlier said he's in the emergency room at Memorial. I bet you've heard the news by now. Use my phone, I've already got his number." April looked at me, shocked. "What have you done? What happened to Carl?" "April, why are you asking me this? I've been here at home with you all evening and I was at work earlier, so I couldn't have done anything to anyone. Why do you think I did something? Why would I even think of hurting your lover? You made it clear that I should stay away from this situation. It's not my concern." My demeanor surely frightened April. She had never seen me like this. I was I'm normally calm and passive, and I never hurt anyone. I never even disciplined the kids physically, I left that to her. Now she saw me differently. My expression was cold and stern, and my eyes were empty. April went into the next room, and I heard her talking on the phone. She came back with tears in her eyes, collapsed into a chair, and stared into the distance. I stayed calm. I picked up the newspaper and knew what she'd heard on the phone. Her lover was ending things with her. Faced with that or enduring a smacking each time he saw her, that was the ultimatum delivered to him by 3 imposing men who'd intercepted him as he left work earlier. They'd made it clear why they'd targeted him and what the repercussions would be. They'd also made it clear that he'd be questioned if he saw or spoke to her again. April was there again to make sure he understood the message. April, she stopped crying, took a deep breath, and spoke to me. Well, it seems you've gotten your way. Carl told me he never wants to see me again. He said he'll return all my belongings and that he doesn't want to communicate with me. In that case, you have nothing to worry about. I have legal representation, so they'll handle it. I responded quickly, putting the newspaper aside and getting up to leave. I'll speak with the boys this weekend and explain why we're divorcing. Hopefully, they're mature enough to understand the situation. If not, they'll eventually grasp it as they grow older. As I was leaving, I glanced back to see April sobbing. If I recall your words correctly, April, you once claimed this affair would be short-lived. We could go back to how we were before and everything would be fine. I couldn't help but laugh at that. April, you're still young and attractive. Maybe you'll find someone who's willing to indulge your fantasies and be open to an unconventional marriage, allowing you to pursue multiple partners. That wasn't me, but that's just my perspective. Best of luck. Children may not understand this, but adults must face the consequences of their actions, and those consequences can be harsh.